We have lots to discuss here in today's video, including some more NHL offseason trade talk. Today's rumors revolve around teams like the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Montreal Canadiens, the Vancouver Canucks, and the Edmonton Oilers. We're going to touch on both some trades and some UFA speculation. Plus, of course, last night we saw the Reaves trade from Toronto to San Jose. We're going to discuss that a little bit further and some of the initial reactions here that we've seen through social media. Plus, we have some more UFA signings today, including Jeff Skinner finding himself a new home. We also have another coaching addition in Dallas, and the NHL and the NHLPA have finally made the full new CBA agreement available for the public to view. We'll discuss some of the key points, including the new salary cap format for the playoffs. We'll discuss that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here in today's video. Let's kick things off first with a little bit more detail and discussion around the trade we saw late last night around Ryan Reaves from Toronto being traded to the San Jose Sharks. Now, of course, a couple of things. One, we know that Reaves was in the final year of his contract. We know that Ryan Reaves didn't really have a huge role with the Maple Leafs last year. Basically, kind of, you could say, falling out of favor, getting put on waivers, put down to the minors, and just kind of lost his spot. They didn't really, see the value in as much as they did in year one of having him in their lineup. Of course, he had signed a 3-year contract with the Maple Leafs before, and just really wasn't working out. So last night we saw the Leafs trade Reaves to the Sharks for young 24-year-old left shot defenseman Henry Thrun. Now, of course, they actually got a roster player who is a serviceable player. I don't think Henry Thrun's going to be any kind of a big star, but he seems to be, from what I've seen, in small sample size, being in San Jose and I'm on the East Coast, I've only seen him play a handful of times. But based on what I've seen about him, what the local media says about him, and the scouting experts throughout the last couple of years as he was going through being a prospect, it seems like he should be a serviceable third pair puck moving D who's not afraid to play physical, and that's probably about his ceiling. Now, of course, things can always change. Some players defy the odds. Maybe down the road he gets into a spot where he can be more trusted in a top 4 role. That seems, right now at least, probably not likely. The Sharks have a lot of defensemen, so it makes sense that they would consider moving one. And I understand from Sharks fans' perspective, they're getting a player who many people feel are kind of in that washed-up category. Reaves doesn't have a lot left in the tank, 1 year left on his contract, and, they gave away a player who's at least younger and more serviceable at this point in their career. So, I kind of get the reaction in a way. So now, of course, the other big part I've seen on social media yesterday was Ryan Reaves, of course, just did a podcast interview with the Cam and Strick podcast with Andy Strickland and Cam Jansen. And on that podcast, we've seen, as is normal with a lot of shows, you get clips that get circulating. If you haven't taken the time to listen to the full episode or that full interview, then you're only going to hear bits and pieces through clips, and some things can be kind of misinterpreted or just, get the full context of it sometimes. One of the things that was kind of being talked about was how Reaves acknowledged, because we know that Mitch Marner, of course, signed in Vegas. Reaves used to play there. I believe he still spends a lot of time there. I'm not sure if he has a home there or whatnot. But Reaves was there, loved his time in Vegas, and like I said, still has some dealings there or whatnot. So he was one of the people that Mitch Marner asked about when making his decision where he was going to play next year. So, of course, he acknowledged this on the podcast, saying that, he had talked to Mitch and, highly recommended Vegas and everything like that. And he also acknowledged in that interview that he said that he wanted to keep playing. He's hoping to win a Stanley Cup and to hit 1,000 games because he's not that far away from 1,000. So, and within not even a full day, he gets traded. I can't remember the podcast interview that came out that same day or the day before, but it is really close together. So I've seen some fans talking online saying, wow, he does his podcast, talks a bit about how he did consult with Marner about going to Vegas and all that, and then suddenly he's gone. It's like, you know what? We can confirm 100% that I would just stop with those opinions because there's nothing to that. His trade had absolutely nothing to do with his podcast appearance and any comments he made in that podcast whatsoever. Ryan Reaves, also, if you listen to the full thing, and he also did another quick interview out in Vegas as well, kind of reiterating the same thing, is that he told the Maple Leafs when they did their exit meetings that he personally felt like it wasn't a good fit anymore and that he would welcome a chance to go to another team where he could actually get a chance to play. Like, I don't think he was demanding a trade or anything like that, but he acknowledged to them they probably were thinking the same thing, but, that it's time probably to move on if we can make it work. So he left there at the end of the season after conducting those exit interviews, knowing there's a pretty good chance I'm getting traded and that I would welcome it because I want to be able to play. Obviously, there's probably not a lot of teams that were willing to take his salary and would kind of give him any assurances that he's going to get a chance to play. A team like San Jose, still low in the standings, still rebuilding for 1 year. Okay, they can probably make that work. They've got a lot of young players to have a guy like him around and be a physical presence and kind of protect them a little bit. Probably not a terrible idea. So, all in all, for all the people out there saying that Ryan Reaves got traded because of his podcast appearance or any comments he made on Marner or anything like that, you can take those opinions and just stop because it's nothing to that absolutely whatsoever. Now, the Maple Leafs are still working on a variety of other things, including trying to find moves for some other players like Calle Jarnkrok and David Kampf. We know they're still actively trying to figure out a way to bolster their forward group, specifically their top six. Losing a player like Mitch Marner, of course, is a big blow. You can't just replace that. There's not like there's 100-point players growing on trees out there they can just pluck and be like, okay, well, here's the new guy. It doesn't work that way. So, replacing him is going to be a challenge, and I don't think they ever really expected that they were just going to find one guy that'd be like, okay, we're good. It's going to have to be a different approach in Toronto. And when you lose a player like that, it's going to have to be everybody else kind of has to pick up the slack a little bit. And the players you bring in, it's going to have to be more by committee to try to replace that. So obviously you want your lineup to be deeper and more productive throughout to try to make up as much of that as you can, because you may not be able to add 100 points to your lineup even by adding, say, 3 new players. It may not be possible. So we know they've added Michelli, who they picked up from Utah, who's a player that needed a fresh start, kind of a reclamation project, if you will. It seems like it has a decent chance to work out. How many points will he put up and how productive will he be? It's hard to say. But I like the fit. I like the odds of a bounce back for him. But again, that's tricky to say for sure it's going to work out, right? There's definitely some risk. But I think they're comfortable with what they accepted there. With that risk. Nick Waugh coming over in that Marner sign-and trade. Okay, another good player, but he's not going to play high in your lineup. He was a fourth-line center in Vegas. Sometimes when he battled injuries, he would move up, occasionally play third line. You could throw him on the wing in a top 6 for short stretches, but he's not a top 6 forward. He's a number 3 to number 4 center, depending on how deep the team is, and he's going to be a player that is responsible. He can check well. He's got good size, decent skater, and he can kill some penalties. So, he's a real solid, traditional bottom 6 guy. So, again, a guy that you like to have on your team, somebody who could probably make that part of the lineup a little bit better. But he's not really going to do a whole lot to help you replace those points that Mitch Marner is taking with him to Vegas. So they're still obviously trying to find moves to bolster that top 6. They can get one more higher-end type of winger to play with, whether it be on the first or second line. They're certainly looking for that, and they know they're not going to just find that by dangling guys like Jarnkrok and Kampf, who they'd like to move on from. Those are more of a cap dump situation. Now, Nick Robertson, of course, he filed for arbitration, so he's likely going to get a contract, obviously, sooner than later, because, obviously, we know it's not going to drag on to the to training camp or anything like that, because we know last year they had a bit of a stalemate, if you will, or whatever you want to call it. Robertson was really holding out, hoping for a trade. Never happened. Ended up signing because he didn't want to, completely miss the chance to play at all. Didn't have a fantastic year, but he had his moments. And, well, we'll see what happens here. They'll probably, if they don't trade him, and right now things are trending towards them keeping him, that he'll sign a 1-year contract and they'll kind of just reevaluate. Ultimately, I think if the Leafs happen to find a trade for somebody who they really like as a good top 6 forward who they can keep for a while, they would probably be willing to put Robertson in the trade. But barring that, it sounds it's more likely than not that Robertson probably stays. So, I mean, that's what Chris Johnson was saying on his latest podcast, which is probably accurate. Like, I still think there's some trades they would be willing to put him in, but it's going to be challenging now, right? So we'll define that deal, and if they don't find it, he stays. Now, another name to watch, according to Dave Pagnotta with the Leafs, that says he's hearing out there a little bit more than he was before, is young prospect defenseman Ben Danford. Of course, they don't have a lot of high-end prospects. Beside Danford, there's Easton Cowan, but teams are asking about Danford in any of these conversations that they're having around the league. So, of course, we don't know exactly who they've all talked to and all that, but Danford's name is definitely out there. Again, if you look at what they have for prospects, I don't know that they really want to trade Cowan or Danford, but I do feel like if they can get the right top six forward, that they will do it. I still think that if you look at things and how that roster's built, they're still trying to be in win now mode while they have Austin Matthews and William Nylander in their prime. John Tavares, of course, has gone through his full 7-year contract. They still haven't gotten where they want to be. He's re-up now, but in a different stage of his career, still productive, but obviously an older player at this point. Their D is better than it's been in a long time. They get some good size and strength back there. To me, they are missing a true quarterback, number one, top, real solid D in that sense, but by committee, they do have some good D. So I don't suspect we're going to see much there. I know they have been linked to Erik Karlsson. That's going to be challenging to pull that off. I'm not sure they're going to be able to do it. They are looking at Dougie Hamilton, so again, we don't know how that's going to go, but that's barring that, it's more likely we see a trade within the forward group. But again, it's going to be challenging, and they might not have a choice but to move one of their young prospects, whether it be Cowan or Danford. And this is the first we're hearing of Danford's name kind of being out there, so we'll see. Now, some other signings here today. The Sharks have signed Jeff Skinner, so he moves on from Edmonton, gets a 1-year contract, $3 million. So they do say, Mike Greer mentioned that he sees Jeff Skinner likely being able to grab a spot in their top six. I think this is a prime example for Skinner to hopefully have a bounce-back season and maybe be a good trade deadline acquisition. He's only making $3 million. They could retain 50% of the deadline, knock it down to 1.5. If he's productive enough, it's a good chance for him to move on and have a chance to play in the playoffs again after he gets his first taste. 1,000 games in his career, finally get to play in the playoffs last year for Edmonton. Now he goes to one of the bottom teams in the league, but like I said, it could be short-term basis there. So we'll see where that goes. Of course, I know seen some pictures circulating earlier. Jeff Skinner and Tyler Toffoli were teammates when they were pretty young, when young kids, so they certainly know each other from their childhood hockey days. So I'm sure they're happy to be reconnected there. A few other quick signings here as well. The Minnesota Wild have signed Michael Milne to a 1-year, 2-way deal. The Jets have signed defenseman Isaac Phillips to a 2-way deal as well. And the Canes have signed prospects Noel Gunler, forward, and defenseman Gavin Bayreuther. Both get 1-year, 2-way contracts. We have another addition to the Dallas Stars coaching staff. It's a little different as well. They've hired David Peltier, who comes over from the Oilers organization. He's been named an assistant coach. He's worked with Glenn Gulutzan, obviously, for an extended time, with Gully being in Edmonton for, I'm not sure exactly. It's been quite a while that he's been there now, or was there, should say, now that he's the head coach of Dallas again, where he worked before as well. But Peltier would have known Gulutzan, like I said, for a long time, working together with the Oilers. Peltier was there for 11 years, but he was the skating coach. He wasn't officially like on the bench and assistant coach or anything. He was like a skills coach, worked on skating, because he is a very successful and highly decorated former figure skater. I don't know if we've ever seen this before. Now, lots of figure skaters have a transition in post-career, active career to being skating coaches. That's not unusual at all. I just don't know that we've seen one go from being a skating coach to an actual assistant coach on the bench. Now, what his role is going to be exactly, we don't know. But when they announced it, they did call him an assistant coach. So it's definitely interesting and not something you see very often, for sure. Now, as I mentioned earlier off the top as well, the NHL and the NHLPA have finally released the full document for the new collective bargaining agreement. Of course, we've known for some time that they had an agreement. We've seen the press conference with Bettman and Daly and Marty Walsh and Ron Hainsey. All they would say in that press conference was they had a deal, and they gave some timelines and all that, but didn't really want to give the details of the on the memorandum of understanding because the players hadn't even been fully briefed and had a chance to vote on it yet. So that's now been all reviewed by the players and the league, fully voted on, fully ratified, takes effect for 2026 to 2030. So the next coming 25-26 season is the last year on the old agreement, and then this new one kicks in for the next 4 years. The one big thing, and I probably will do another video kind of outlining more now that we have the official document, but one thing that a lot of people I think we're most interested in was how this playoff salary cap is going to work. So essentially, there's going to be changes to how LTIR is used during the regular season as well, and then there will be a cap in the playoffs. And just to kind of summarize a little bit without making this too long and drawn out here, so when players go on long-term injured reserve during the regular season, if they're expected to return during the season or during the playoffs, so their season is not 100% over, then they will be able to get relief of what they call the league average salary. So it's not going to matter what that particular player is earning. So last year, the league average salary was like $3.8 million. So let's say, for example, you have a player on your roster that's making $2 million and they are gone on LTIR. They're out for an extended time injury. But you know what? You can't guarantee that they're not going to come back. They're still they could come back for the playoffs or whatever. So you get league average LTIR availability. So $3.8 million. So in that case, when you're making under, you can get a little bit extra money to spend. Now, if you're making $8, $9, $10 million and that player goes out on LTIR, obviously you can't spend anywhere near what they were making. So that is going to change things in that sense as well. So that's how LTIR is going to work. It's not going to be based on the player's contract that they themselves are earning. It's going to be based on league average salary. So you can use that LTIR like you normally do today during the regular season. Nothing really changes except for how it's calculated. When you get to the playoffs, now I guess actually one other point to that is if a player is 100% done for the year and there's no chance they're coming back, you can apply for exception to the league to use their full salary. So if they're making more than league average, so let's say they're making $6, $7, $8, $9 million, and 100% that they're not going to be coming back, their injury's too severe, they're absolutely done till at least next season, then you can apply to the league to use their full salary instead of the league average. Now, in that scenario, it's a little bit more fair because there's no chance you're going to be able to re-add them back into the mix come playoffs, which is the problem that people have been complaining about. Now, when it comes to the playoffs, essentially, like I said, you can have whatever's on your roster at the end of the regular season. Nothing really changes except how it's calculated game to game. So for each game, your lineup has to be cap compliant, which is what we had talked about before as a potential scenario, which I thought might have been good. And it is kind of basically what they're doing. So essentially, so each day, when you have to submit your roster, I guess 5 hours before game time to make sure that it's been approved. Now, there are exceptions, and it sounds like to me my interpretation of the wording of the CBA for this section is basically if you have a player that is like a game time decision and something changes less than that 5 hour, there can be exceptions made, but you have to make a call to the league. They have to be notified as soon as possible, and then you have to get your new player that's going to replace them in on that lineup and make sure that they're still cap compliant. So there are some exceptions there, but right now, based on how it's worded, is typically you submit your roster 5 hours ahead. You have to be cap compliant. So now in the regular season, if you have anything else affecting your cap, so you had some buyouts from the past that you still are counting against it, or you had a bonus overage that's counting against it, or you have dead cap space from retained money that you traded a player and retained some, whatever is counting against your cap during the regular season as dead space will also count against your cap in the playoffs. So like, for example, last year, the cap, like $88 million, if you went into the playoffs and you had, say, $3 million of dead space that was utilized from retained money and a buyout that you did from previous contracts, then obviously there's $3 million there that you can't use because that's dead space. Your lineup salaries cannot count for more than, say, $85 million. And of course, if you acquire a player with retained salary, the only part that counts is the same as it is today, is whatever your team is responsible for. So if a player's making $3 million and you acquire them and the other team keeps half the money, then you're on for 1.5. That's what they count against for your playoff cap. So every game you have to be under the cap. So basically it's just going to prevent teams from saying, we have a $9 million player, he's going on LTIR, we're going to add another $9 million player, and then in the playoffs they're both going to play. And then that's an unfair advantage. That's not really what it was designed for, but based on the rules, nobody was cheating. I'm not saying any teams were cheating, but certainly some teams exploited it more than others. And there's definitely some cases that we've all seen where it was questionable for sure. Now, like I said, nobody was cheating because that's what the rules were, whether we like it or not. I guess depending on who you cheer for, probably depends on how you feel about it. But for example, I know Puckpedia, our main resource for salary cap information and contracts and everything, which is a great site. I recommend you check it out if you don't know. Most people know about it by now. They went on with these new rules and they calculated last year's final game in the playoffs, the rosters that the Oilers and the Panthers used, to see how they would compare to this new rule. So, for example, the Edmonton Oilers last year, at this time, they had, keep in mind the cap was $88 million. They had a buyout on there, the money that was affecting their cap via buyouts for $3 million, and they had bonus overages of $3.5 million. Their on-ice salaries added up to $74 million. So when you take $74 million and you add the dead space that they had from the regular season, that puts them at $80.6 million. The cap was 88, so they're well below. Now keep in mind, Zach Hyman was not available because he had that injury with his thumb, his hand, and he was out. Now, even if Hyman played, you add his salary in, they'd still be under the cap. And, of course, that means another player comes out as well, so it would drop back down a little bit. So they still would have been cap, because at this rate, they're cap compliant with about $7.5 million to spare. If Hyman was in instead of another player, then maybe it's Jeff Skinner, something like that. Then you're probably looking at, instead of 80.6, maybe it works out to be like 83, 84, whatever. Either way, they're still cap compliant with $3 to $4 million to spare. The Florida Panthers, on the other hand, very different story here. Their on-ice cap for the players that dressed in their cup-winning game was $91.279 million. They also had some dead space on there. They had, including a buyout money of $1.2 million and bonus overage of $500K. So they were a total cap hit in Game 6 of the Cup Final of $93 million, which puts them $5 million in change over the cap. So that's a big difference. So $93 million compared to $80 million. So a $13 million difference in salaries in those two teams playing against each other in the Stanley Cup Final. Pretty significant. So that's why this is changing. So that should level things out. Like the other big thing that allowed Florida to have so much salary too is, remember, right around the trade deadline, Aaron Ekblad gets suspended for 20 games for performance-enhancing drugs. And when that suspension takes place, his salary no longer counts against the cap. So when players are suspended, they're allowed to be replaced. That was also, that's basically what allowed them to add Brad Marchand. So, yeah, it's kind of crazy. But that with the new rule, this should level things out. So I do personally think it should make things more fair. Either way. So we'll see what happens when we get to next, not the year coming, but the year after, and how this all works out. But yeah, I'm debating doing a video sometime over the weekend here, kind of outlining this full CBA stuff, a little bit more details, just so everybody can fully understand how it all works. Now, a few other quick rumors here before we end the video. Last night we talked about the Edmonton Oilers, and there was a rumor from a couple of different insiders suggesting that If the World Junior trial that's coming up here, we know that the trial's done. We're waiting on a verdict later in July. That the speculation the Oilers were monitoring that to see if Carter Hart was going to have his name cleared and that he might be a goaltender that they would be considering trying to sign, because we know they really want to change the goaltending mix. And I've seen it from numerous sources that that's something that they're looking at. Now, Jason Gregor, another media member who's well connected with the Oilers in Edmonton, says that he's checked into things and says that's not true. So we'll see. But we have one, obviously, like I said, Gregor's a good media source. So he says it's not happening, not true. And of course, obviously, depending on the verdict of that trial, will make a difference in whether or not it's even an option anyway. But we'll see what happens there. Another one that's been refuted as well is there are some members of the Montreal media suggesting now that they are not really after Evgeny Kuznetsov. We know he does want to make a return to the NHL. That's been pretty well documented. But according to some sources out of Montreal media, that the Habs are not interested in signing him to fill their number 2 center spot. They are certainly very still interested in trying to make moves to fill that spot. But it doesn't seem like Kuznetsov is really the target here. So we'll see what happens. On that front in Vancouver, I know another name to watch. They're still, again, just like Toronto, they've got a lot of things that they're still trying to do there. We know that there's some players, like we mentioned before, like Dakota Joshua, Teddy Bluger, they might be available. Another guy to watch, though, is goaltending, though, is Shelovs. I do wonder about him. There's been some talk that he likely is going to be moved sooner than later, given the fact that they just re-upped Demko. They got Lankin in long term. He's kind of blocked out from getting an NHL opportunity now. And after winning a Calder Cup and really being some strong development in the last couple of years, it sounds to me like a change of scenery is probably coming for him, for a team looking for goaltending help. I do wonder if he could be an option. And of course, another update on Quinn Hughes. I know Greg Wyshynski of ESPN recently talking about that scenario on a couple of different spots. I know he touched on it with Jeff Merrick on the sheet on his show the other day, and he also touched on it on the Calgary show as well, talking about how things are trending with Hughes in Vancouver. And according to Wyshynski, he feels that things are trending in the wrong direction and that ultimately they will end with him departing the team sometime before his contract's up, and that he estimates that the Canucks eventually will decide to get ahead of it and be proactive and make a trade happen, kind of like we saw with a Matthew Tkachuk type of scenario. Obviously a little bit different, a little bit different stage of his career, but not drastically different, but different in a sense that if he gets to the point where he kind of lets them know that, hey, I'm probably not re-signing, that they'll want to get ahead of it. I mean, ultimately losing Quinn Hughes would be a massive blow. And he says that it's not a guarantee this is going to happen. There's still things that happen that might keep him there, but just that things are trending that way right now, and he still sees Hughes is likely departing. I think with the moves that the Canucks have made this year, I think that they've done a lot of this with Quinn in mind. I don't know that we can ultimately say for sure that it's trending like really bad right now, like Wyshynski's made it out to be. I mean, they've certainly improved their goaltending. Keeping 2 solid goaltenders there for long term. They should be solid in that area. We know the team has certainly had a bad year, a lot of drama that appears to be gone out of the room. They got a new coach who I know Hughes really likes. Brock Besser's back, who I know he's pretty friendly with. So I don't know. I mean, Garland and Besser both re-signed. We need a bounce back from Pettersson, who I know that he's been close with in the past. I don't know it's a given that Quinn wants to definitely leave, but I think there is desire for sure to play with his brothers at some point. But I do think that it's a captain of the team, and I think it's really going to boil down to how he feels about the Canucks, and I don't think it's a given. But obviously a guy like Wyshynski would have a little bit more inside intel than I would, but he doesn't think it's going in the right direction, and eventually will lead to a trade. Not right away, probably looking at the very least this year's trade deadline, but again, that'll depend on how the team is doing. If not, maybe into next year sometime, because obviously it would have to be before the contract is up to make sure they don't have him walk up the door for nothing. or even what we saw with Mitch Marner, right? It's a sign and trade. You do get a return, but it's not a lot. So we'll see what happens on that front. But let me know your thoughts on all of today's news in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.